Now, throw on top of that an IRS agent showing up at a taxpayer's home. That taxpayer just happens to be testifying before the House Judiciary Committee on the weaponization of government against U.S. citizens. I mean, the chance of that happening is infinitesimal, but it happened. Mr. Commissioner, welcome. You're quoting statistics of 87% response rate versus 15% last year. Where are you getting those numbers? Because I have something completely different. Do you have the numbers to back up those percentages?
We do, Senator. This is the same methodology that we've used for years.
Okay, well, please provide me those numbers because we
Absolutely.
couldn't find them. The numbers I have, by the way, is last year, 63 million calls, and you answered 21 million for about a response rate of 33%. This year, the calls are way down. I think people just got discouraged. 26 million calls and 16 million were answered. So you actually answered less according to the numbers I got from the IRS. So I'd like to figure out what that discrepancy is.
Absolutely.
Secondly, with $45 billion flowing into your coffers on enforcement, I am highly concerned about how are you going to keep partisanship out of your enforcement efforts. You know, how do you make sure that enforcement is apolitical? We have examples of the IRS being weaponized. The Tea Party, targeting the Tea Party. You know, the lack of enforcement, quite honestly, when we have emails showing Hunter Biden simply didn't disclose income. We don't see any enforcement action. And the most recent, and I say outrageous example of this, was journalist Matt Taibbi was testifying before the House Judiciary Committee, their weaponization of government. Basically, the day he's testifying, an IRS agent ends up showing up at his home. First of all, how common is that? Listen, I've filed a lot of tax returns, paid a lot of taxes. I've never had an IRS agent show up at my home or my place of business. I mean, how unusual is that to have an IRS agent show up at anybody taxpayer home is kind of the first notice that you've got an issue with your tax returns.
So first of all, Senator, I want to repeat something I said earlier, which is I'm prohibited from discussing.
Understand. So that's why I asked you a general question.
So I say that
what is the normal course of action for notifying a taxpayer if you're going to, for example, reject their tax return?
So we have made public for all taxpayers to see what they can expect from the IRS in terms of when we might call you, when a home visit might occur. It is something that we want to make sure that the taxpayers have an understanding of because there's a lot of scams out there. Mostly, if the IRS is reaching out to you, it's probably not the IRS. So we as part of our
So I think this is pretty well documented that an IRS agent showed up, put a note on Mr. Taibbi's door, called them in 4 days, which he did. They explained what the situation is. I find that unbelievably unusual. And I'm asking you as IRS commissioner, does that happen often? How unusual is that an IRS agent would show up at a taxpayer's home and tell them, give us a call? Now, throw on top of that, an IRS agent showing up at a taxpayer's home, that taxpayer just happens to be testifying before the House Judiciary Committee on the weaponization of government against U.S. citizens. I mean, the chance of that happening is infinitesimal, but it happened. So I'm just saying in general, how often does the IRS show up as the first notice that there may be an issue with the problem with the taxpayer's return and makes a personal appearance at that taxpayer's home? Is that part of your procedures? Does that happen very often?
Again, I want to be cautious in my answer to make sure that I am not violating a prohibition.
That's fine. Talk in general. How often does that happen?
I will talk generally. That if a taxpayer, if the IRS is reaching out to you directly, it is more likely the case that there has been some issue with your return. We've tried reaching you through less intrusive means. We have been unsuccessful. We want to help and get a handle on why you may not have filed, on why you might have an outstanding balance due. You're
not answering my question in terms of how often that would happen. My time's running out, so all I can say is I know Chairman Jordan has sent you and Secretary Yellen a letter requesting all the information on that. I will be sending a similar letter. I'd like it if the chairman would join me in that letter to get this information, because this is very troubling to have the IRS take that type of action. Again, the chances are so infinitesimally small that an IRS agent would show up at the journalist's door the day that journalist is testifying before a House committee. So I'm also going to be requesting that all the documentation, all the information on that specific case. I believe Mr. Taibbi has already issued a waiver for the IRS to provide that information. So I'm asking, will you comply with that, with those requests? Will you turn that information over to myself and to Chairman Jordan?
As long as we can do it consistent with Section 6103, yes.
Okay, thank you.